Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Creative Connections webinar. This week we are very excited to have with us the wonderful Dr. Terri Janke. Dr. Terri will present today's webinar titled First Nations Protocol in the Digital Space. My name is Ian R.T. Collis. I'm a member of the Daryabulap clan of the Gundungurra people and the very proud grandson of the wonderful, the late Auntie Dawn Collis. As a Daryabulap man of the Gundungurra, I pay my deep respect to the Gadigal and the Eora, where I stand today. I too rightly pay my unstoppable respect to the many countries where you stand today. I pay my deep respect to the elders of the past, present, and our future, honouring our custodianship responsibilities through time immortal, the dreaming, while recognising the strength and capacity and the resilience of our past and present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clan groups and language groups. If you'd like to join me in acknowledging where you stand today, please share within the chat feature, which is just at the bottom of the screen, what country you are joining us today from. We've got the Kulin Nation. We've got Wiradjuri country, Gamilaroi. We've got Kulin, a whole bunch of wonderful, wonderful nations. A lot of Wiradjuri there. And Manjalan, how fabulous. Thank you all for joining us today. Currently on screen, there is a blue PowerPoint holding slide with text and a video boxes of our guest speaker, Dr. Terri Janke, an Auslan interpreter. I, myself, am a queer man in my early to mid-late 30s. I have brown, messy hair, black round glasses, wearing a very fabulous shirt in front of an abstract landscape painting with soft light pouring in. Creative Connections is delivered entirely online. You can choose the sessions that are relevant to your needs and interest. All webinars are free and all will be published after this lovely session we're about to go through. Please feel free to share any of these sessions with anyone whom you think might be interested. These sessions are focused around three themes. 1, leadership, 2, digital, and 3, artistic practice adaptation. I would encourage you to explore the schedule and to choose what might work for you. Before I hand over to the wonderful Dr. Terri Janke, I've been asked to go through some features of housekeeping and notes on today's session. Firstly, live captioning is available via Zoom, and if you can't see the captions, you can turn them on by pressing the CC button or the window below Zoom. You can also select a full transcript of in a window on the right if you prefer. Francis from our team today is running today's chat, and I encourage you to share and utilize this chat with any ideas, resources and thoughts that you may have. The chat feature, again, is at the bottom of the Zoom window. A Q&A with Dr. Terri Janke and myself will occur at the end of today's session. Laura in our team will be looking after this. So if you have a question, please add it in the Q&A section, again, at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to respond. If we don't respond to you immediately in the session, you can email us at leadershipprograms@australiacouncil.gov.au and someone will get back to you. If you're having tech issues throughout the session, just raise your hand with the chat feature below, and Laura from our team will be in touch to work that out with you and then to iron out any tech issues you might be having. Finally, the Australia Council for the Arts is recording today's session. As with each session, these recordings will be accessible via the Creative Connections webpage on the Australia Council for the Arts main page. This week, the Australia Council has made a focus on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture and arts. Yesterday was Think Outside the Square with First Nations Digital Spotlight, with the wonderful Travis D. Verez, John White, Marinda Donnelly from Black Dance, and Patricia Ajay from the Australia Council for the Arts. Friday will see our First Nations Roundtable for artists, creative independence, and organisations. It will be run by the wonderful chair of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Strategy Panel, Wesley Enoch, and Deputy Chair of the Australia Council for the Arts, the delightful Leanne Baxking, in an ongoing series and updates on First Nations culture and the arts. Today, however, we have Dr. Terri Janke. Dr. Terri will present today's webinar, First Nations Protocols in the Digital Space. Dr. Terri is a respected authority on Indigenous cultural intellectual property. Terri is a respected member of her peoples, known for innovative ways of creating pathways between non-Indigenous business sector and Indigenous people within business. As an owner and solicitor director of Terri Janke and Company, she manages her team to deliver excellent results to a diverse client base. Terri advises on legal matters, including intellectual property, business law, shareholder agreements, and governance of Indigenous organisations. She has been involved in writing regarded cultural intellectual property protocols and models for various sectors, including the arts, museums, archives, film, and businesses. Today's Creative Connections sets out to ask, how can we observe practice in First Nations protocol in a digital space? And what are the considerations and restrictions around accessibility for our First Nations peoples? And what are the current Australia Council for the Arts protocol guidelines? And what are these protocols in relation to the digital space we find ourselves in today? It gives me great pleasure to invite Dr. Terri to share her slides. Terri, thank you so much for coming along today, you gorgeous woman, and take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Feels funny to be in my kitchen talking to a whole lot of you, but thank you very much, Ian, for your warm welcome. Hello to everyone out there through the digital space. I am beaming in from my kitchen, but I'm in Yuin country. I'm staying on the south coast and living down here for the last few months. And I acknowledge country here. I acknowledge the Yuin people and their beautiful country and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people through this device. Hello, and to everyone else, hello. And I acknowledge all your countries where you are calling from, where we're connecting from. And I saw some there, people calling from Bunurong, Wangal, Gadigal, all over Australia. So hello to everybody. I'm going to share today about First Nations protocols in the digital space. But it occurred to me that 30 years ago, I used to work at the Australia Council. I had a break from my law studies at the time, and it's otherwise known as dropping out. But I actually discovered the need for intellectual property advice and copyright, and I am forever indebted to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that I came into contact with through my love of the arts and my work at the Australia Council, because it really helped me find intellectual property as an area of law to focus a career. And 30 years down the track, here I am sitting in front of this screen and to describe to myself, to people out there. I am in my early 50s. I have dark brown hair to my shoulders, and my skin is brown, and I'm wearing a very bright sort of purpley pink top, and I'm sitting in my kitchen with a bunch of flowers to my right, and to my left in the background there's a picture by Aaron Meeks, which I got at the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair last year. But I'm showing on screen a picture of my team, who I miss because we've all been working remotely over this, but I'm got some writing there which is saying that we're celebrating 20 years. So the firm's been operating for 20 years now, and we've been empowering our clients to create and achieve goals. And I just wanted to thank the people out there, and I know some of you that I saw through the chat have been our clients and friends over the years. I really want to thank you all for supporting the firm over the past year. And thank you, Australia Council. Today's session, I'm going to talk about Indigenous cultural and intellectual property and talk about why those rights are important. Then I'm going to focus on the Australia Council protocols, which we've been involved in since 2003. And then I'm going to highlight the issues for digital spaces and how the protocols might be observed and practiced in the digital space. I hope I'm not going too fast, sign people. I just want to say a special shout out to Jodie Barney out there, and hope that I'm not going too fast for her. I'm starting with a slide that is asking the question, what is Indigenous cultural and intellectual property? It's a term we use in the arts to refer to the rights of Indigenous people to their cultural heritage. And the work stems out of 1990s work that was done internationally by a study that was looking at the rights of Indigenous people to their intangible heritage. And I worked on a report, Our Culture, Our Future, way back then. And a lot of the rights and the issues were highlighted in that report. But it is basically the rights of Indigenous people to their heritage. And their heritage is their Indigenous cultural and intellectual property. And it is holistic in that it's interconnected. So it is the tangible and intangible, the things we can touch and the things we can't touch, all connected. So it includes things like literary, performing and artistic works, which is the things that we have in the arts area, like the songs, the dances, the theatre productions and artworks. And it also includes documentation of Indigenous people. So that's like films and sound recordings of Indigenous people's experience, our ceremonies, but also maybe files and records taken by other people. It also includes scientific and ecological knowledge. Indigenous people have a deep relationship with country and living on it for many thousands of years. They have knowledge of healing properties of plants, for example, and that is part of their living culture. Cultural property, museums call them artefacts, but for Indigenous people, they are our belongings, our treasures, and unlocking our access to them and to know where they are in the world can revitalise our cultural expression. Practices like weaving, possum skin cloaks, and all sorts of craft and traditional knowledge practices can be revitalised through that. Immovable cultural property, when I'm talking about that, it is about land and sites. So not just sacred sites, but all country and the stories that associated them, whether it be song lines, but living experiences of people living on country. And then there is Indigenous ancestral remains, and that includes human remains. In the past, Indigenous people's ancestors' bodies were studied for science, but it also may include DNA. Genomics is a growing area, and it also includes languages. languages which continue to be spoken, those that are speaking that have been revitalised, and getting access to recording and linguist works is a very important right for Indigenous people. So you can see there I've got it in a circle. It's connected to place, it's communal, it's heritage, it's owned collectively, and it's living. It's not locked in time. It didn't end on 1788. It's continuing, and they're cultural rights. So it's very, very important for Indigenous people because it's linked to land and identity. It's constantly evolving. And even how I've got it as this map, there will be other things that are in it that are not included. And it's handed down through the generation to generations, and within groups. People have responsibilities to practice that culture, but to pass it on as well. And there may be rules, customary laws, or consultation and consent processes. Cultural protocols become an articulation of those rules, but it may be, for example, men's and women's business, anything sacred, people understand those rules, but there may be other rules as well that form the protocols. And these cultural connections remain forever. And it is a space that Indigenous people see. When you speak to Indigenous people, they will understand protocols and about these responsibilities, but the conventional law doesn't recognise it. The only legal articulation of these rights is in an international declaration, or the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And it has an article there that articulates the right of world Indigenous people to maintain, control, protect and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions. And it says that Indigenous people seek the right to maintain, control, protect and develop their intellectual property over this cultural heritage, traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expression. But on the scale of things, this is a declaration that doesn't translate as domestic law, like the Berne Convention on Literary and Artistic Works brings in the Copyright Act. It is probably on a lower rung in terms of international documents, and it is used as an aspirational and informative document that can influence policy. Nevertheless, I think it's a very important article, and the declaration itself very important to have a look at in terms of an articulation of Indigenous people's rights to their culture. But through this space, I think it's important to look at the limitations of Indigenous artists who will be practicing culture and working with protocols, but they're interfacing with the public, and that's where intellectual property laws, the laws that the Commonwealth of Australia brings into play to protect intangible things like literary and artistic works and films and sound recordings. So you can see the limitations being formed, and this document that I'm showing now is 2 columns. One is outlining an intellectual property approach which responds to a European model of artistic and literary practice. And in the second column, we're looking at Indigenous cultural and intellectual property as the way that Indigenous cultures are practiced. And the first thing in the difference between an IP model is that the intellectual property laws, particularly copyright, focus on protecting material form. So for even just to get copyright protection over an artwork, for example, it has to be in a form that is, canvas, paint on canvas. The story has to be written down. So styles aren't protected, where for Indigenous cultures, styles come from country, stories about country, they're orally and performance-based. That particular story is not protected, but its expression is. IP protects individual authors' works. And so we have this notion of authorship, the person who creates the material form. But ICIP, there's a collective responsibility, ownership, and individuals have responsibilities to that collective. It is recognised in a case called Bullen Bullen and RMT Textiles that artists who incorporate traditional knowledge in the works have a fiduciary duty to the collective, but within the actual statute, the Copyright Act, it's not recognised. IP are economic rights, except for moral rights, but they are largely given to creators to incentivise them to create more and to make money. That is the reason why those rights exist, the reproduction rights. And for ICIP, it's cultural rights. People are practicing to keep culture continuing and to hand it down. IP can be assigned in writing, but ICIP, you have this cultural practice, it's staying within the community. And another big limitation is IP has this limited duration. There's a point in time where these rights to control your copyright, for instance, end, and that's 70 years after the death of the creator for a work. And then it goes into the public domain, which is where anyone can copy it and adapt it and use it without having to come back to that artist or to the community to ask consent. But for ICIP material, those rights continue. So old stories and songs and dances, they continue to be part of ICIP. So there is the sort of difference between the two. But that said, I think it's important to use IP and copyright where you can to protect your rights. So now I'm going to talk about protocols, because protocols are ways to deal with that gap in the law, and they're promoting good faith and ethical conduct, ways of engaging with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous cultural material. So it's promoting responsible use of Indigenous cultural knowledge and expression to ensure that these cultures are maintained and passed on to future generations. And protocols are recognising the diversity of First Nations communities. There's many throughout the country, but it's ways of dealing cross-culturally with this material from community to community. Recognising that communities may be in remote parts of Australia, but also in cities, and these protocols exist across all of those areas. And when we deal with ICIP and artists taking their heritage works to the public, we're dealing with IP laws because they are impacting on works even without there being any contracts. So those laws apply as soon as works are created against the world. So what we're saying here, a framework for protection and a strategy would include knowing about IP laws and using them to your advantage, using the protocols, and also using contracts, because contracts can give rights against the parties of the contract that don't exist in law. And that's a way that you can build a framework in a space where we are now, where there is no sui generis or standalone laws to protect Indigenous cultural and intellectual property. Indigenous people have been calling for a special law to protect Indigenous cultural and intellectual property, and that hasn't happened in Australia. Some countries in the world have them, but we Indigenous people in Australia are a minority, and the road to legislation has been very difficult. So we use this framework, these three areas. And this is where the Australia Council work has been very instrumental in promoting art form practice that is cognizant of not just the copyright laws and asking permission to copyright owners, but it is promoting protocols and going back to heritage owners and asking for permission. So the story of the protocols, it started off that there were 5 art form guides: music, performing arts, visual arts, new media and writing. And this is being set up through the Australia Council since 2002. And it is something that the Australia Council has been able to develop as an industry standard, and it is a condition of getting funding. My journey with the protocol started in 2002, and we were commissioned by the then director, Kathy Brady, who saw the need for these protocols. And I remember her vision was to have protocols that arts practitioners who were out there trying to advocate to the people that they were collaborating with that, hey, you need to consider all of these cultural things when we're working together. If we're writing a play, if we're doing a festival, these are the things that, you know, are appropriate ways of dealing with cultural heritage. So she had these ideas that they would be these booklets about the size A5 that people could have in the back of their jeans pockets, but that they weren't so heavy that their jeans would fall off, but just enough so that they could have something to back up their arguments when they're trying to advocate for cultural protocols in the space that they were working with. In 2007, we did the 2nd edition, and they're the yellow forms, and they were, like the first ones, printed in hard copy, but they're still available now as a digital version through the Australia Council website, and also our website has them as well. In 2016, my firm was funded by the Australia Council to produce a guide, which was a case study guide of different art forms that had used the protocols and in their projects and implemented them. And it goes through the successes and the challenges, and that is on our website and the Australia Council website. But it is highly downloaded by people working in the arts to look at how their colleagues and other organisations have dealt with the implementation of protocols. So I would recommend that to you. We have been working with the Australia Council and with Trish Ajay's been involved in this, and we've updated the protocol. And so a lot has happened since the 2007 guide. Arts itself, there's been so much merging of the art forms that this new rendition of the protocols will be a complete document. So all of the art forms will come together, and we will go through the introduction stuff about what is protocols, what is IP, and all of that. And then we'll break down into the art forms. There'll be more case studies, and then we're having things like project tools and checklists for people working in the area, and points of practice that can help them, and clauses in contracts. And we were able to get a lot of new case studies in the document, and thanks to anyone out there who helped us with the case studies that are going into the new guide. But now I just wanted to go through the principles, and we call them true tracks at Terri Janke and Company. We devised 10 steps that are flexible to be overarching big picture principles that can guide people working in this area. And they're good to know at the start of a project so that when you're planning them, it can be a way of making sure that you're not just last minute coming on something and then trying to, meet a deadline and it's something that causes a roadblock or a dispute. So I'm showing here a purple map that has numbers 1 to 5 with a number of words on it, which are the principles. And although it's 1 to 10, they're not principles that are sequential. They're things that may interlink, and you need to consider them all at the same time and revisit them while you're doing the project. So principle 1 is respect. It's Article 31. Aboriginal art styles are not in the public domain. Old stories of country, not in the public domain. Traditional dance, no. You must respect the right of Indigenous people to own, protect, maintain and control their Indigenous cultural and intellectual property. Principle 2 is self-determination. So the right to self-determination, we hear that a lot. For me, it means that Indigenous people are the ones that are empowered to make the key decisions about how their arts and culture is used. So that could be about making sure that the Indigenous people are the creators and the innovators. Or if you're working on a big project, that there is a group that are guiding it. Principle 3, consent and consultation. So we have this notion of free prior informed consent coming strongly through the international law on Indigenous people's rights. And here it is in the arts. So the challenges here are finding out and identifying people to get consent from and consulting widely with Indigenous people about the use of their cultural and intellectual property. 4, interpretation. Indigenous people have the right to interpret their culture. So the way that they refer to it is the Indigenous voice should be prominent. 5, cultural integrity. Do not use it in ways that are derogatory or harmful to that cultural, and look at authenticity there. 6, secrecy and privacy. There being Indigenous rules around customary laws. I mentioned gender-specific things, but it also includes privacy of individuals. If you're writing stories, just because someone shared you a story in a forum, it doesn't mean that you can write their personal story about being a stolen generation survivor, for example. 7 is attribution. Now, moral rights have the right of attribution and the right against false attribution in the copyright law, but attribution must also be given to the groups, the cultural owners of stories, songs, art that comes from country. 8 is benefit sharing. Indigenous people have the right to be paid, to have non-monetary benefits. It has to be something that they can also be benefiting from. 9 is maintaining Indigenous culture. So that's thinking about over the length of time how the project might impact the rights of Indigenous people to control the dynamic of where their culture goes in the future. And good projects would always have that at the heart of it. But also consider, how do you keep the links? How do you keep those people connected in future? We see a lot of projects where people do recordings and they might be working with someone and then they go away and it goes into an archive, but they don't keep in contact with the next generation. So the kids of those people that were involved in it do not know. So how do you respect this principle 9? 10, recognition and protection. And that is basically using copyright laws, contracts and protocols to give effect to these Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights. So that's a lot to think about. I hope I haven't lost anyone. I can't see if the numbers have dropped off because I've only got the PowerPoint slide. But I just am showing a slide now that's asking the question about ICIP in the digital space. And what does it mean for these rights when we're dealing it in a digital form? And I've had a lot of calls from people working in this space since the coronavirus pandemic and the shutdown of a lot of theatre performances, art exhibitions, museums and galleries are shut down. What does that mean for us as artists, or me as someone who wants to go and engage with it? What does that mean for ICIP rights, and how do we practice it? Putting exhibitions online, for example, the artwork might just be able to be, right-clicked and copied, and it might end up all over the world. And we've seen that happen recently. The example about Urban Outfitters and the woman from Central Australia whose work ended up on a rug. And my good friend Bibi Barber, who had her work copied from a website, which was reproducing her work under license from an exhibition, but it ended up on the carpets and walls and just about everywhere of a Polish hotel. So no, there's no doubt about it that the digital form allows for ease of copying. I mean, it gets the message out there, but it's also ease of appropriation, and it's beyond borders. So the sad part of it is if there is an infringement in copyright, you have to take the action yourself, but an Indigenous artist being able to take action against an infringement that's occurring overseas, you have to take the action in the jurisdiction where that person is, where the infringement occurred. There's a lot of limitations there. So people are very nervous about that and looking at ways that they might use the technical parameters of the platform to either watermark the digital image or put some sort of restriction on being able to right click. So you can see there that these sort of ways of thinking about how you can stop the ease of copying. It's not the same as, for example, in a exhibition which is selling things, to be able to limit someone taking a copy of it, a photograph of it. Performances. So some very great ideas have come out of the lack of live theatre, and people are doing live theatre through all sorts of different platforms. Concerts and plays and cultural events are occurring, but people are worried here about, it's not the same because the whole play goes out there. It's not just a live performance that someone's watching, it's a whole copy. So it is, no doubt, it's the copyright right to communicate to the public that's being exercised there. But if you are a performer and you're just doing your cultural dance, you might not have copyright in the way that I was saying it being written down before. So the broadcast and the recording through the technicalities of copyright end up owning an interest in copyright, but the performer themselves doesn't have it. So performers' rights are there, and I'll talk a bit more about that later, but they raise concerns for people. And collaboration. So we have user-generated content. Can someone just copy and add to your work and all of that? That's changed the context. And then we're also seeing a lot of people teaching their craft via webinars and what have you. And what does that mean? Can someone just copy that and then they turn around and they're weaving and they're dancing those dances? Their concerns. So the concerns are increased appropriation from anywhere in the world. There's this longer time that the work is going to be up there, it's captured. And depending on the platform, it might be Facebook or Instagram, there will be rules about who can share that because you're engaging with that platform. So how can we share cultural knowledge respectfully and not have someone copy or use culture without us? So I'm showing now here that slide again with the 3 areas of intellectual property laws, protocols and contracts, and putting some sort of speaking boxes that are trying to suggest ways of strategies that people can that people can have strategies when they're interacting in a digital space. I'm going to start down the bottom with intellectual property laws. So, in the digital space, copyright, it is the right to communicate to the public if you are the copyright owner. So there would need to be a permission given of that. So agreements could deal with that as a license. But performers have rights as well. Even if they don't own the copyright in what they're performing, they have the right to say yes or no. The best practice would be to get a sign off on that. And there's moral rights too. So the right of integrity, the right to not have your performance or your work or your film treated in a way that will hurt your reputation is a moral right under the under copyright law, and it is something that is for performance as well. So things to take into account there: integrity and attribution and right against false attribution. But then protocols must also come into this space. So obviously the environment should encourage respect and follow those protocols. And I would have a look at the Australia Council protocols, or look back at that True Track 10 steps that I just showed you, and think about how the project in the digital space meets all of those 10 principles. I'm just picked up a few points from it to think about. Firstly, is it suitable to put the content on that platform, given that there will be wide dissemination of it? And depending on the platform, you need to do a bit of due diligence. You know, are you only going to put it up for a short amount of time? If it's on Facebook, it's going to be quite a wide, people can comment, you know, and use it. That might not be appropriate. If you are doing that, you should brief the people who are involved that it's very wide dissemination. So the question there is, have you considered the impact? Because if they know, they're not going to put their most important work or their most prized cultural heritage story up there if it's going on Facebook and having very wide dissemination. But you must consult and get consent, or give them time to consult and consent widely with the relevant people. And then the other point is around context and integrity. Just thinking about how easy it is to change the context of someone's performance or their art or their films even that they're sharing, and how can you guard those integrities. So the protocols might be around asking people not to take it out of context, even though, and using the IP laws of moral rights to back that up. And then we have contracts. So we're saying using agreements, commissioning or engaging works that are suitable for the digital space, and having these rights recognised in there, clearing copyright material, it becomes an issue. I mean, if you're performing, you know, there's the performance statutory license that you can perform someone's work, like their song or read their book, for example. But if you're doing it online, it's a copyright right that you're doing, you're communicating it to the public. So that's, you have to go and get clearance of that. And then the other one that I'm recommending is the use of notices. I think in the same way that you have the copyright notice, or Creative Commons have their notices about how they share material, I think we should develop that in the Indigenous space when we're practicing our culture online, because of things like the pandemic, but more and more in the future. I think there will be a digital celebration of culture. So what I'm showing now is an example of a copyright, an ICIP notice that you might have on your platform, or I'm scrolling in there, and I'm just, it's quite lengthy, and I'm going to paraphrase it. But it says, in this online performance, we will display a range of material, including, but not limited to, oh, that's such a lawyer's inclusion, that but not limited to, art, body painting, tattoos, dance, music, ceremonies, plays, films, sound recordings, and traditional knowledge of lifestyles, food preparation, traditional healing, and technical skills. And it then says that it's protected by IP laws or customary laws of First Nations people. And it says, we reserve the right to control how our culture is shared, used, and accessed by others. Then it says, dealing with part or whole of the performances or the recording for any purpose which is not authorised is a serious breach of customary laws and a breach of copyright and performers' rights. And then it makes the statement, all other rights must be negotiated. And it ends with, please respect our cultural practice so we can keep our culture strong. So this is an example of wording that could go on these platforms to really make it strong. And then within the celebrations online, you could point to those protocols and use the Australia Council one. What I'm showing now is an example of a teaching Indigenous art forms and skills online. Here I'm saying here this could be a copyright notice. I think you've also got to make sure that you are not teaching the most your most special cultural art form online. Something very simple, because it is teaching it, someone else may copy it. But here the text is saying the methods used are cultural practices. Whilst we are sharing with you, it's for display purposes only, and you have no right to reproduce, copy, modify, publish, bit of a typo there, sorry guys, transmit, participate and transfer and create derivative works, etc., etc. It's basically asserting that you are not authorised to basically use these materials for your own purposes of teaching others. And there's just some examples, and I'm going to stop there and take some questions. Thank you.
I love a beautiful, strong Black woman. Terri, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. We've got questions flooding in from all sorts of really extraordinary and remarkable cultural practitioners and artists. So thank you everyone for being here today to have these conversations. We're just going to start with a really wonderful question that asks Terri, what protocols are in process for our Aboriginal brothers and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters to protect cultural sign language?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think there are any protocols. I think they should develop on the back of these 10 steps, could be. But I did go to a language conference recently for last year, Pulima, in Larrakia country, and they were talking about Indigenous Sign Language at that event. And for me, it was very enlightening, and I was talking about protocols around language and Indigenous languages that are revitalised, and trying to have protocols that give rights for when people are using the language commercially, or making sure that these cultural centres, these language centres have done so much work, are acknowledged, and you keep that. But the sign language, someone gave a sign presentation, and that was raised as how that is an important Indigenous language, but we didn't really cover the protocols. So I think that is an oversight. So my suggestion would be that these 10 steps should be protocols around protecting Indigenous cultural sign language, First Nation sign language.
I agree, and particularly as a choreographer by trade, I have a deep respect for our cultural movement, and it has stories all throughout it, and it must be respected. We're running a little bit over time, but who cares? We're blackfellas. You can't give us an hour to fit in 60,000 years, so.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Everyone's got such wonderful questions, and I want to make sure that we've got some extra. We're going to spend an extra 10 to 15 minutes, if it's all right with all you mob, just to make sure that we can unpack these really wonderfully thought about and really great questions. So here we go. Another question is, in regards to the Australia Council for the Arts protocols that we've just been involved in developing, Dr. Terri, when will these be available? Patricia said later this year, and I believe that's correct. Is that right?
Well, Patricia, I know, I'm not sure if she's on the chat, but she was working on it. It was due this year. I think things might have been slowed down due to the pandemic and things being shut, but we're hoping that they'll be up this year. Yes, we are aiming for June. Yay, Trish. Thank you.
Mob pulling together, as always, we love. The next question is, do you think protocols are transferable? Now, this is a really interesting question. Do you think these protocols are transferable to culturally and linguistically diverse artists and IP for migrant communities if they are not Indigenous specific?
I do. I think it's, again, the respect of those protocols follows Indigenous cultural practice and respect. So it's a cultural, they stem from cultural ways to culturally connect, understanding that what's being shared is fundamental to that person's identity.
Of course.
Indigenous point of view, connection to country, connection to family, connection to the status in a community, all of that. They're much, the principles, I think, can be things that can be used in other cultures because they're very broad-based and they can follow and deal with the specifics of different cultures, because already those protocols deal with many different cultures. You know, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, Anangu, Yuin, Wuthathi and Meriam, all is something that the protocols are already dealing with. And I actually had someone from, I've had people from over in Norway wanting to use them, people in Canada, and they were First Nations people. But I actually had someone who was a filmmaker in Ireland who was wanting to use protocols in there, and I thought for a minority community, and I thought that that was interesting that they saw the model as being flexible for that sort of thing. So my answer is yes.
Wonderful. Another question we have is, what should we keep in mind when engaging with First Nations artists, arts professionals for online conversations, i.e. meetings inviting First Nations people and speakers to public, Zoom conversations, etc.?
Yeah. I think people are getting used to being invited to through Zoom, all sorts of different platforms now, Indigenous people. What would be a good way, I mean, you can invite them. I think it might be good to speak to them about the most appropriate platform if you've got more than one that's available to you. And don't just invite them by the invite, you know, Outlook thing. Maybe speak to them about it before. And the other thing is when you start, and I know people have done this, is just acknowledging the country from where you are, from where they may be. And I've been seeing a lot of, you know, I'm talking, you know, big meetings, those acknowledgements being really inclusive of not just the country you're on, but the country where you are beaming out in the world too.
That's wonderful, Terri. Thank you. I'm going to squish in one more question because they're all so deadly. If that's okay with you, Dr. Terri?
Sure.
Okay. How does Indigenous cultural intellectual property apply to transcripts of traditional cultural stories as if they were downloadable educational resources? It's an interesting question.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the protocols are that those stories, even though they might be in an old book or available online, education departments should be connecting with the living people because, well, firstly, what's written might not have been written by the Indigenous person, and we might have wrong or dubious interpretation. It might be sacred or secret or unsuitable for the education setting, and it might totally be out of date and, you know, the wrong view. And also, I think that if you're an educator wanting to involve Indigenous culture within the schools or the universities or any course, that you should really be focusing on these protocols. They focus on living culture. So how the question becomes, by bringing culture into my course to teach people, how do I give life to this living cultural practice? And that, to me, is about bringing in the, you know, it's bringing in the artists and the creators and reading the works of Indigenous writers, having Indigenous playwrights being able to tell their story and visit your school or take your school to their theatre production. And I think that that way the protocols are really about holistically and meaningfully engaging Indigenous culture in an education setting. And it makes it much deeper and more about what Indigenous practice is, rather than going to a resource that might be, oh yes, that's out of copyright, I can use it. It's not the same value as dealing with someone who's contextualised it, interpreted and followed all those protocols. So I would encourage people in education to follow those protocols as well.
I agree, and then it provides the opportunity for the information to come from the authentic climate in which it comes from.
Yeah, and although it might be legally okay, because public domain between copyright, you don't. I don't think it's very. I don't think it's actually very good education practice.
I agree. And it happens so frequently. But this is why these conversations are so critical. So I really thank you, Terri. And I think that's all the questions we have time for today. I really appreciate everyone sticking around. I can see a lot of you are still here. Before you go, however, I would just like to do a little bit of a roundover, and on behalf of Dr. Terri and I, send my respects to all of the countries that are calling in today: the Waka Waka, the Turrbal, the Yagara, the Yorta Yorta, the Yirinji, the Yuan, the Yagara, the Eora, the Darik, the Larrakia, the Gamilaroi, the Yarl, the Aranda, the Wangu, the Wadri, the Banjalan, and the Nganangara. How wonderful is our diversity of our peoples and our stories and our countries. And just as our countries are unique to their environment, so too is the rhythm, the information, the stories, the dance, the protocols that come from our peoples, our gender, our elders, our countries. And it is such an honor to be here with you today, Dr. Terri. Thank you so much for all your time. And before we leave, I would like to encourage everybody that on Friday, we have the First Nations Roundtable. Please register. It's going to be wonderful. We've got Dr. Rachel Mazza, AM, from the Ilbidgery Theatre Company in Melbourne. We also have the wonderful Eva Grace from Yuriakan Theatre Company in Perth. And finally, we have the delightful Marinda Donnelly from Black Dance. Please join us again also on Friday for another Creative Connections, balancing responsibility, innovation in unusual times. And then on next Wednesday, we have collaboration, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We hope you can join us. Thank you everyone for your time.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for your lovely hosting.
My pleasure, darling.
Okay. And thanks to the team behind the scenes as well. Thank you.
And thank you to the Auslan interpreters.
Yes, thank you.